HOA Karen called cops on my wife for not opening my barn. Didn't know she's the new police chief. Karen banged on my barn door, yelling at my wife to open it now. When my wife said no, Karen grabbed her phone and called 911 with a big smile. "Send police right now," she shouted. Karen didn't know she just called the cops on the police chief herself. 10 minutes later, a police car pulled up. Karen stood there with her arms crossed, waiting for her big moment. She had no idea what was coming. The car door opened. Out stepped my wife Sarah in her police uniform, badge shining bright. Karen's face went white as a sheet. "Good morning, Mrs. Wellington," Sarah said like a true professional. "You called about uncooperative residents. I'm here to help. What's the problem?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No words came out. I didn't know. Karen finally managed to say. "You didn't know what?" Sarah asked, pen ready to write. "You called 911. I'm here. What's the emergency?" I wanted to laugh so bad. This woman just called the cops on the police chief. But this story gets way crazier. What happened next would destroy Karen completely and show everyone what she was really doing in our neighborhood. Let me tell you how this all started. My name is Mike Anderson. 3 months ago, my wife Sarah and I moved to Sunshine Valley. It's a nice neighborhood with big houses and perfect lawns. Sarah had just gotten promoted to police chief of our town. We thought we'd finally have some peace. Boy, were we wrong. Our house came with a big old barn in the backyard. My grandfather built it in 1945. It was full of old farming tools and family memories. To me, it was special. To Karen Wellington, our HOA president, it was a problem. Karen showed up on our second day with a thick folder of papers. She looked like the kind of woman who never smiled and always found something to complain about. "Welcome to Sunshine Valley," she said, but didn't sound welcoming at all. "I'm Karen Wellington, HOA president. We need to talk about that barn." "What about it?" I asked. "It doesn't fit our community standards. It needs to go." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That barn has been here for 80 years. It was here before this neighborhood even existed. Karen's eyes got cold. "Things change. We have rules now. The barn violates at least 12 different regulations." She handed me the thick folder. Inside were photos of our barn taken from every angle, measurements, and a list of violations that made no sense. "You have 30 days to tear it down or face daily fines of $500, Karen said with a mean smile. After she left, Sarah and I looked through the papers. The violations were crazy. Roof color non-compliant. Structure height exceeds limits. Historical appearance disrupts neighborhood aesthetics. "This is insane," Sarah said. "They want us to destroy a piece of history because it doesn't look modern enough?" Over the next few weeks, Karen became our nightmare. She drove by our house twice a day taking pictures. She sent us violation notices for everything. Our mailbox was 2 inches too far from the curb. Our grass was 1 day overdue for cutting. Our car was parked at an incorrect angle. Each violation came with a $200 fine. "She's trying to force us out," Sarah said after we got our 8th violation notice in 2 weeks. "But why? What's so special about our property?" That's when our neighbor, old Mr. Peterson, knocked on our door with some interesting information. "Mike, I've lived here for 30 years, he said quietly. "Karen's been trying to get your property for months, even before you moved in. Why would she want our land?" Mr. Peterson looked around to make sure no one was listening. "Strange things have been happening at night. Big trucks with no license plates. Men who don't look like they're from around here. All coming and going from properties Karen has somehow gotten control of. What kind of business needs to operate at night in secret? The kind that doesn't want police attention," Mr. Peterson said. "Your barn sits right in the middle of what she needs. Perfect location between the highway and the back roads. She can't complete her operation without your land." That night, Sarah and I decided to do some investigating. We looked up public records about Karen and the other properties Mr. Peterson mentioned. What we found was shocking. In the past 2 years, Karen had somehow gained control of 5 different properties in our area. Each time, the previous owners had been hit with massive HOA fines until they were forced to sell cheap. Karen's company, Valley Development Solutions, had bought every single one. "She's running a scam," Sarah said looking at the paperwork. "Create fake violations, fine people until they go broke, then buy their properties for nothing." "But why does she need so many properties?" Sarah's police training kicked in. "Mike, look at the locations. They form a perfect triangle around our barn. If someone wanted to move illegal goods without being seen, this would be the perfect setup." The next morning, Karen escalated her war against us. We woke up to find our barn padlocked with a bright red condemned sign nailed to the door. I called Karen immediately. What the hell is this? Emergency safety inspection, she said sweetly. The structure is dangerous and must be sealed until repairs are made. You can't just lock up our property. Actually, I can. HOA Emergency Powers, Section 47B. The repairs will cost approximately $25,000. Until then, the barn stays locked. But Karen made one big mistake. She didn't know that Sarah had already called her old partner from the state police, Detective Maria Santos. Maria specialized in organized crime and had been tracking suspicious activity in our area for months. Sarah, we've been watching truck movements and cargo patterns around your neighborhood, Maria said when she arrived that afternoon. Someone's running a major smuggling operation, and your property is right in the middle of it. You think Karen's involved? I think Karen's running it. We just need proof. That proof came sooner than expected. That night, Sarah and I were woken up by the sound of heavy trucks. Looking out our window, we saw 3 large trucks with covered cargo moving slowly through our neighborhood toward Karen's properties. Sarah grabbed her binoculars and camera. Mike, those trucks have no license plates. And look at the security around them. I counted 6 men with earpieces walking alongside the trucks. This wasn't a normal delivery. We need to follow them, Sarah said. We got in our car and followed at a distance. The trucks went to a warehouse that Karen's company had bought 6 months ago. We watched as men unloaded boxes and crates in the dark. Whatever they're moving, they don't want anyone to see it, Sarah whispered, taking photos. But the most interesting part came when Karen herself showed up in her luxury car to supervise the operation. She was clearly in charge, giving orders and checking paperwork. Got her, Sarah said, snapping pictures. The next morning, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. She claimed certain residents were causing problems and disrupting community safety. The meeting was packed. Karen stood at the front with her usual mean attitude. We have residents who think they're above the rules, she began, looking directly at us. People who refuse to maintain community standards and create security risks for everyone. What security risks? Asked Mrs. Johnson from Pine Street. Unsecured structures that could be used for illegal activities, Karen replied. Which is why we must have full inspection access to all properties. That's when Sarah stood up. She still hadn't told anyone in the neighborhood about her new job. Mrs. Wellington, what legal authority do you have to demand property inspections? Karen smiled her mean smile. I'm the HOA president. I have all the authority I need. Actually, you don't, Sarah said calmly. Property inspections require warrants or clear evidence of criminal activity. What evidence do you have? I don't need to explain myself to you, Karen snapped. Well, maybe you need to explain yourself to me, came a voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to see Detective Maria Santos walking in with 2 other officers. Karen's face went pale. Karen Wellington, you're under arrest for racketeering, property fraud, and conspiracy to commit smuggling. The room exploded. People were shouting, taking pictures, and demanding to know what was happening. As they handcuffed Karen, she looked at Sarah with pure hate. You have no idea what you've done. This operation involves people who don't forgive interference. Ma'am, you're threatening a police officer, Maria said. That's another charge. The arrest didn't stop with Karen. Over the next week, police raided the warehouse and the other properties Karen controlled. They found millions of dollars in stolen goods, illegal drugs, and evidence of a smuggling ring that stretched across 3 states. Karen had been using HOA authority to force out homeowners and create a network of safe houses for criminal operations. Our barn was supposed to be the final piece, a perfect storage location that looked innocent but provided easy access to major highways. The best part? All the fines Karen had issued were declared illegal. Every homeowner got their money back, plus damages for harassment. But Karen's story wasn't over. During her trial, more secrets came out. She had been working with organized crime families to move stolen goods and drugs through suburban neighborhoods. The HOA scam was just one part of a much bigger operation. The judge wasn't impressed. Mrs. Wellington, you violated the trust of your community and used your position to facilitate serious crimes. This court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison. As they led Karen away, she looked back at us one more time. But instead of anger, I saw something else in her eyes. Fear. She knew that the people she worked with didn't like failure. 6 months later, our neighborhood is completely different. We have a new HOA board that actually cares about residents instead of harassing them. The barn is officially protected as a historical landmark. And Sarah loves her job as police chief. But the most satisfying part? Last week I got a letter from Karen in prison. She wanted to apologize and warn us that some of her business partners might still be angry about the operation being shut down. I showed the letter to Sarah. Should we be worried? She smiled and pointed to her police badge. Let them try. They already made the mistake of messing with the wrong family once. Karen Wellington learned the hard way that bullies sometimes pick fights they can't win. She thought she could intimidate us into giving up our family property. Instead, she destroyed herself and exposed a criminal network that had been operating for years. Sometimes the little guy wins. Sometimes justice actually works. And sometimes the person you're trying to bully turns out to be exactly the wrong person to mess with. Karen's got 15 years to think about her mistakes. Meanwhile, we're enjoying our peaceful life in a neighborhood that's finally safe from people like her. The barn still stands proud in our backyard, a reminder that some things are worth fighting for. And every morning when I see it, I remember that standing up to bullies isn't just about winning, it's about protecting what matters to good people everywhere. Karen Wellington called the cops on my wife. She just didn't know my wife was the cops. And that mistake changed everything. She handed me a thick packet of papers. These are all the violations we've identified. Your mailbox is the wrong color. Your driveway needs power washing. Your grass is a 1/4 inch too long. Oh, and that vegetable garden in your backyard? Completely against regulations. I flipped through the papers. There were 23 violations listed. The estimated cost to fix everything was over $15,000. This is crazy. None of this was mentioned when we bought the house. Not my problem, Susan said. You signed the HOA agreement. Ignorance isn't an excuse. After she left, I called Lisa at work. She's a teacher at the local elementary school, and I could hear kids in the background when she answered. Honey, we have a problem. When I told her about Susan's visit, there was silence on the other end. David, we can't afford $15,000. We barely have $500 in our savings account. That night, we sat at our kitchen table surrounded by HOA documents, trying to figure out what to do. The HOA rules were 200 pages long, written in legal language that made no sense. Look at this, Lisa said, pointing to a section about lawn maintenance. It says grass should be between 2.5 and 3 inches tall. Who measures grass? We decided to attend the next HOA meeting to ask for help. Maybe if we explained our situation, they'd give us time to make the changes slowly. The HOA meeting was held in the community center on Thursday night. There were about 30 people there, all looking miserable. Susan sat at the front with 4 other board members, all middle-aged women who looked like they'd never smiled in their lives. When it was time for resident comments, I stood up. Hi, I'm David Chen from Maple Street. My wife and I just moved here 6 months ago, and we received a violation notice for things that were already on our property when we bought it. We're asking for some flexibility on the timeline because the costs are really high. Susan cut me off before I could finish. Mr. Chen, rules are rules. Everyone here follows them. We can't make exceptions. But these violations existed before we even lived here. That's not relevant. You own the property now, so you're responsible. An older man in the back raised his hand. I've lived here for 15 years and my fence is the same height as his. Why isn't mine a violation? Susan's face got red. Sir, you're out of order. We're not discussing your property right now. Because you're targeting the new people, the man shouted. This is harassment. Security. Susan called out. 2 security guards came in and escorted the old man out. Everyone else just sat there in shocked silence. Anyone else have comments? Susan asked sweetly. Nobody said a word. The next morning I found a new violation notice on my door. Now they were saying our car was parked wrong in our own driveway. The fine was $200 per day. I called the HOA Management Company, Prestige Community Services. After being on hold for 45 minutes, I got through to a bored-sounding woman. I need to speak to someone about these violation notices. They're ridiculous. Sir, all violation notices are reviewed and approved by the HOA board. You can appeal in writing. How long does an appeal take? 6 to 8 weeks. But I'm being fined $200 a day. That's over $8,000 while I wait for an appeal. Not my problem, sir. That weekend I decided to do some research. I went to the county courthouse and requested all the HOA documents for Willowbrook Gardens. What I found made my blood boil. The current HOA board had been in power for only 8 months. In that time, they'd issued over 500 violation notices and collected more than $200,000 in fines. Before they took over, the previous board issued maybe 20 violations per year. Even worse, I found incorporation documents showing that Susan Martinez and the other board members had started their own company, Willowbrook Property Services, just 2 months after taking control of the HOA. They were paying their own company $50,000 a month for maintenance services. They were running a scam. Create fake violations, collect huge fines, and funnel the money to their own company. I printed out everything and drove to the police station. The desk sergeant looked bored as I explained the situation. This sounds like a civil matter, sir. You need to handle it through the courts. But they're stealing money from homeowners. Do you have proof they're keeping the money for personal use? I showed him the documents about their company. He shrugged. Looks like they're providing services. Unless you can prove fraud, this is between you and the HOA. I left the police station feeling defeated. These people had all the power and nobody seemed to care. That night, Lisa came home from work looking exhausted. Honey, I have bad news. The principal called me into her office today. Apparently, Susan Martinez called the school district and complained that I was harassing her. She demanded that I be disciplined. What? That's insane. It gets worse. She told them I was unstable and might be dangerous to children. They're putting me on administrative leave pending an investigation. I couldn't believe it. Now Susan was attacking Lisa's job. This is war, I said. She wants to play dirty? Let's play dirty. The next morning I did something that changed everything. I created a Facebook group called Willowbrook Gardens HOA Truth. I posted all the documents I'd found at the courthouse, showing how the board was scamming residents. Within 24 hours, 150 residents had joined the group. People started sharing their own horror stories. Margaret from Oak Street posted, "They fined me $2,000 for having the wrong color doormat." A doormat. Tom from Pine Avenue wrote, "They said my Christmas lights were excessive and fined me $500 a day for 3 weeks. I lost $10,500 for having Christmas lights." Jennifer from Elm Street shared, "They towed my car from my own driveway while I was at work. Said it was improperly positioned. Cost me $300 to get it back." The stories kept coming. Susan and her board weren't just targeting us, they were terrorizing the entire neighborhood. By the end of the week, our Facebook group had 400 members and local news stations were calling. Channel 7 wanted to do a story about HOA abuse. The reporter, Maria Gonzalez, came to our house on Saturday morning. She was young, energetic, and clearly angry about what she was hearing. "Mr. Chin, how much money have you been fined so far?" "Almost $12,000 in 3 weeks. For violations that existed before we even moved here." "And your wife lost her job because of this?" "She's on administrative leave. The HOA president called her school and made false accusations." Maria interviewed 6 other families in our neighborhood. Everyone had similar stories of harassment and impossible fines. The story aired on Sunday night. The headline was HOA Horror, Local Board Accused of Scamming Residents. Susan Martinez declined to be interviewed, but they showed her running away from the camera when Maria tried to ask questions outside her house. Monday morning, I woke up to find my driveway blocked by a tow truck. Susan stood beside it with 2 men in suits. "Mr. Chin, your vehicles are being towed for violation of parking regulations." "These are my cars. In my own driveway." One of the men in suits stepped forward. "Sir, I'm an attorney representing the HOA. Your vehicles are parked in violation of updated regulations passed by emergency board vote last night. You can't just change rules overnight." "Actually, we can. It's in the HOA bylaws section 47B. I watched helplessly as they towed both our cars. Lisa came running out in her pajamas. "David, what's happening?" "They're stealing our cars." The lawyer handed me a paper. "You can retrieve your vehicles once all outstanding fines are paid. Current balance is $15,847. After they left, I called every lawyer in town. Nobody would take our case. HOA law was complicated, expensive, and most attorneys didn't want to deal with it. That's when our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, knocked on our door. She was 78 years old and had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. "David, dear, I saw what happened. I want to help." "Mrs. Patterson, I appreciate it, but unless you know a lawyer who works for free, I don't know what anyone can do." She smiled. "Honey, I retired 2 years ago after 45 years as a federal prosecutor. I specialized in fraud and corruption cases." My jaw dropped. "You're a lawyer?" "Not just any lawyer. I put 3 congressmen and a dozen local officials in prison for corruption. And what Susan Martinez is doing makes me sick." Mrs. Patterson came into our house and spread her own documents across our table. She'd been investigating the HOA board for months. David, what they're doing is called racketeering. It's a federal crime. They're using their positions to create fake violations and steal money from residents. She showed me bank records she'd somehow obtained. The HOA board members had deposited over $300,000 from fines into personal accounts over the past 8 months. How did you get these? I still have friends at the FBI. They've been investigating HOA fraud across the country. Your case is exactly what they're looking for. The next morning, Mrs. Patterson made a phone call that changed everything. Agent Williams? It's Eleanor Patterson. Remember that HOA fraud case you mentioned? I think I found you a perfect example. Within 4 hours, FBI agents were at our house. Agent Williams was a serious woman in her 40s who took notes on everything we said. Mr. Chin, what you're describing fits a pattern we've seen in 12 other states. HOA boards taking control and using their power to extort money from residents. Can you help us? We can do more than help. We can shut them down. The FBI investigation moved fast. They had warrants to search Susan's house and bank records within 48 hours. They found evidence of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. But the best part was what happened at the emergency HOA meeting Susan called to address rumors and misinformation. The community center was packed. Every seat was full and people were standing along the walls. Susan and her board sat at the front table looking nervous. Thank you all for coming, Susan began. It's important that we address the lies being spread by certain residents who refuse to follow community standards. That's when Agent Williams walked through the door with 5 other FBI agents. Susan Martinez, you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. The room exploded. People were cheering, crying, and taking videos. Susan's face went white as they handcuffed her. This is ridiculous. We were just enforcing HOA rules. Ma'am, you stole over $400,000 from your neighbors. That's not enforcing rules, that's criminal fraud. They arrested all 5 board members right there in front of everyone. The whole thing was on live TV because Channel 7 had been tipped off. Over the next week, the FBI raids continued. They seized all the HOA's financial records and froze their bank accounts. The investigation revealed that Susan and her friends had been planning to steal over $2 million before disappearing to Mexico. But the most satisfying moment came when we got our cars back. Not only did we not have to pay the fines, but the FBI seized Susan's house and luxury cars as evidence. She went from living in a $500,000 house to sitting in a federal prison cell. The trial lasted 3 months. Mrs. Patterson testified as an expert witness on HOA fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Susan Martinez was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The other board members got 5 to 8 years each. They were ordered to pay back every penny they'd stolen, plus damages. But the real victory was what happened to our community. We elected a new HOA board with Mrs. Patterson as president. She wrote new bylaws that required transparency, limited fines, and gave residents real power to challenge violations. The Facebook group I started became a model for other neighborhoods dealing with HOA abuse. We've helped residents in 15 other states fight corrupt boards. Lisa got her job back with an apology from the school district. The principal admitted they should have investigated Susan's claims instead of just believing them. 6 months after Susan's arrest, Channel 7 did a follow-up story. They interviewed families who'd been terrorized by the corrupt board. How does it feel to have your neighborhood back? Maria Gonzalez asked me. It feels like justice. These people thought they could bully us because we were new and didn't have money. They forgot that regular people can fight back when they work together. The story went viral on social media. We received messages from thousands of people dealing with similar situations. Many of them used our case as a template for fighting their own corrupt HOA boards. Susan Martinez tried to appeal her conviction, claiming she was just enforcing legitimate rules. The appeals court rejected her case, saying the evidence of fraud was overwhelming and disgusting. She's currently serving her sentence at a federal prison in Texas. Her parole hearing isn't scheduled until 2032. Mrs. Patterson became a hero in our community. At 78 years old, she'd taken down a criminal organization and saved her neighbors from financial ruin. The city council gave her a medal for public service. I spent my career fighting corruption in government, she told the local newspaper. It was time to fight corruption in my own backyard. Today, Willowbrook Gardens is a completely different place. People actually know their neighbors. Kids play in the streets. We have block parties and community events. The new HOA board focuses on actual community improvement instead of harassing residents. We've built a playground, organized neighborhood watch programs, and started a community garden. Lisa and I learned something important from this experience. When bullies think they have all the power, they get careless. They make mistakes. And if you're patient and smart, those mistakes will destroy them. We also learned that ordinary people can make extraordinary things happen when they refuse to give up. Susan Martinez thought she could intimidate us into submission. Instead, she created the worst enemies she could have imagined, people with nothing left to lose. The HOA fraud case made national news and led to new federal laws protecting homeowners from corrupt boards. Our nightmare became the catalyst for helping thousands of other families. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing you ever did. Susan Martinez tried to destroy our lives, but instead she gave us a purpose and a community we never expected. If you're dealing with HOA abuse, don't give up. Document everything. Find allies in your community. And remember, bullies are usually cowards who crumble when people fight back. Susan Martinez learned that lesson the hard way from a federal prison cell. And every morning when I drink my coffee and look out at my perfectly ordinary fence and my slightly too long grass, I smile. Because sometimes the little guy wins. Justice isn't just about courts and laws. It's about regular people refusing to let bullies win. Susan Martinez picked the wrong fight with the wrong people. And now she has 12 years to think about her mistakes. We sleep well at night knowing that sometimes good people win. What would you do if your HOA tried to steal your home? Have you ever dealt with neighborhood bullies? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice and community courage.